Welcome to Peace, Love, and Pollinators, the podcast that's anything but your typical gardening show. We're here to transform how you see your backyard, balcony, or local park by uncovering the powerful connections between you, your plants, and the planet. From pollinator-friendly gardening hacks to creating green spaces that fight climate change, we explore more than just what to plant. We dig into why it matters. You are listening to Peace, Love, and Pollinators. And here we go with another episode of Peace, Love, and Pollinators. I am very excited to welcome a good friend of mine. Michael Chavez, who goes by Mike, is a Boston-based architect, community organizer, and is passionate about workforce development. Having co-founded Social Impact Collective nearly 5 years ago, its mission is to work to identify systemic inequities through partnerships with local communities and to build resilient solutions with long-term impact. His work spans from rural agricultural in Minnesota to attainable housing in urban Boston. I've known Mike for over 10 years, and he's always working on cool projects. Mike Chavez, welcome to Peace, Love, and Pollinators, my friend.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. It's always a pleasure to be in the presence of greatness.
I am so excited for this episode. I've been dying for this one. So this episode is about a super cool project that Mike and I worked on together. We were able to build 30 green roofs on bus shelters along the one of the bus lines in Boston. And we are just going to be diving into that and the unique partnerships and the unique aspects of getting green done. The Living Green Roof Bus Shelter Initiative started long ago with just two friends having a conversation about how can you create green infrastructure and green jobs simultaneously. Can you just tell us a little bit on how it started and what got us to where we are today?
Yeah, sure. So I think you've always had the initial idea of thinking about the bus shelter surface as a place to do green infrastructure, as a way to make a public statement. I remember when you and I first met talking about this idea. And it just so happened that the timing of this came around 2012 when Superstorm Sandy came through the New England area, hit New York real hard, hit Boston, flooded a lot of this area. And after that storm, the city of Boston had a competition where they, put out what would resiliency look like along the coastal areas of the city of Boston. And there was all these really big master plans that came out of that, big, beautiful master plans that were showing all these different ways that Boston could deal with stormwater resiliency along the coast. And of course, me being having my community organizer hat on, always thinking, well, what about the inner city? What about communities of color? What about places that are here right now and not able to kind of just get a brand new facade like like the waterfront might have along city edge? And you started talking about bus shelters, and I thought, well, what if we thought about what green infrastructure means at the here and now, at small scale, and let's take your idea of doing bus shelters and talk to people about what that means to them. And so I think when we started talking about this, we were saying, well, if we're going to design and build this, billion-dollar new waterfront in the city of Boston, multi-billion-dollar, right? Who's going to build it? How does it impact the rest of the city? And how does it impact the existing infrastructure that's already here? Let's start with that little bus shelter and let's figure that out first. And so that's really, I think, where this conversation started, and then we started we had the opportunity to test it 10 years ago. And that's where that pilot came through, when we were just starting to talk to folks and trying to say, here's a picture of what some people are proposing Boston might look like. What does that even look like to you? And folks are talking about how it looked like some foreign country, right? Or some place that was getting a brand new city built. And
it had really canals and gondolas and everything going on. It was awesome.
It was awesome, right? And people just couldn't relate to that because here we are now with flooding streets, and here that is, and who knows when, right? And we're trying to build a bridge here, and that's really what this whole project was about. It's not a green roof project. We're not a green roof company, but what we are process-oriented community engagement specialists, I think, that use existing infrastructure as a way to talk to people about what these bigger goals are for the city and how do we get there. And I think that's really what this has been all about.
100%. This was the first step. It's like, somebody had to break the seal. Somebody had to take the first step. And, otherwise, again, we're just looking at big, beautiful pictures of what could be.
Right.
So, right. Excellent. And, and then here we are today with 30 of them up and, the step has been taken, the gauntlet has been thrown, and, Boston, I'm so grateful to be a part of this city, and the one who decided to be the first Somebody had to be the first. Everybody's scared to be the first. Mayor Wu just stepped right up and said, all right, we're going to be the first. And I'm just so proud to be a part of it, but to be a part of, the city that decided to take the chance on two guys like us. So that was pretty cool.
100%.
So let's kick things off with the concept of public-private partnerships, Mike. Why do these collaborations matter, especially in the world of green infrastructure?
Yeah, well, public-private partnerships, I think, are one of the hardest types of partnerships to have, but at the same time, I think the end result could be the best if everyone's doing their part. And I know you're really into, Housewives and Love Island and stuff, right? Like I know you, Trevor, right? I'm just kidding, you're not. But I feel like public-private partnerships are like those types of shows, right? There's a bunch of different players. Everyone's got an agenda. I think the main difference between those shows, though, and what we're doing with these partnerships is in the shows, everyone's kind of got their own thing and all trying to accomplish their own individual piece. Here, all the players and then the best public-private partnerships, everyone's really trying to get one common goal at the very end. And I think at the end of the day, the best results come from when everyone's contributing in some form or fashion. It could be time, it could be energy, it could be money, all of the above. And at the end of the day, if all the players are really putting all their effort in, you can really get a really, really good end result. And I think that's what we're really testing with these bus shelters and the green roofs that we're putting on there and green infrastructure in general, is that it really takes a little bit of everybody's contributions to make that thing work.
No, absolutely. It's definitely, it's a newer or unique approach I found when we were working on it. And, I think it's something that once perfected, it's going to kind of be the roadmap for the future. But every partnership in itself, has its growing pains. So what were some of the biggest challenges you ran into while working across sectors on this project? And it was a long slog. So let's talk about some of those challenges.
Sure. I think the biggest one is communication. That's always the hardest part to try and figure out. And that's just true for any relationship, whether it's professional or not, it's communication. And so I think the biggest one here was about trying to find the ways that everybody communicates with one another. There were people that we were working with on this project based in New York, here in Boston. We had people in different departments, right? Public sector, private sector, corporate sector. We had us, nonprofit sectors. And so everyone does things a little bit differently on a little bit of a different timeline, a little bit different scale. And so part of that's just finding the balance between all of that and then really diving in to figure out, okay, what's your love language, right? And how do we then share all of that so everyone's a little bit happy and we still can make that end piece work? So it really was getting the communication factor down. That was really the hardest part of this. And then once we started getting there, things started to roll a little bit more quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I would also the communication and the red tape. There was definitely some red tape to go through on that, but that is to be expected when when you have so many people involved. Here's like the big thing, and this is where my passion piece comes into this, is the small steps, big impact. The bus shelters seem like small potatoes, compared to like the green infrastructure projects that Mayor Wu and the city of Boston or, other municipalities, around the country are taking on. But this small little project packs a huge punch. So what makes this kind of micro scale project powerful and worth replicating?
It grabs attention. At the end of the day, this is one of the types of projects that people see and really want to talk about, right? It's an engagement process. And I think that's what's special about the Living Roof Bus Shelter Initiative, generally speaking, is that it engages with people in a different way that they're not used to. They're able to see something in a way that they're not quite used to seeing. And again, it's kind of in your face a little bit. You can engage with it, be under it, next to it, drive by it, and you'll notice it. And I think that, as people that we've talked to when we were doing the installations, 10 years ago and also now, all of them were excited about the fact that this is something a little different that's in their neighborhood. And so I think the special thing about this is that it provides a platform for us to tell the story. And although it's not as big of an impact necessarily from a stormwater filtration standpoint, which it still makes an impact, but when you can get these massive rain gardens and bioswales and kind of really tackle things at a much larger scale, this is the tool that people are going to use to talk about those things that a lot of cities really need more of, I think, to be able to, again, really bring attention to what's happening at a green infrastructure scale across an entire metro area.
I think you're absolutely right. Like, there are much larger projects which will have potentially a much larger impact. But this one is, this one is no joke. And we'll get into that a little bit later. I would like to say, though, when going back to the previous question, I would just like to point out that you and I did this as a pilot project 10 years ago. We waited almost 10 years to the month to actually have this come through. We pulled off a bunch of shelters in this very same manner, using a grant from the EPA way back in the day when we had a lot less gray. 10 years later, here it is. And it's like, now the world is ready for this. And it took a while for everybody to kind of catch up, but it's definitely awesome. But I really I want to get into the good stuff because, these are the questions that people are like always asking. And this is the part that I think people really want to know. I mean, they want to know about the public-private partnerships and that whole angle, but let's talk about the process of the roofs, because this was no joke. I mean, This went under many iterations and everything else. So starting with fabrication, what did you learn from building the green roofs? And if you could do it again, what would you change? But there were some major hiccups kind of in this initial design fabrication process.
Well, lesson one, I learned that you're a bleeder. You got some bleeding hands in this process. I think I saw, you put your work in, Trevor. I know you did. You got your literal blood, sweat, and tears up there on those shelters.
Absolutely. I put my heart into every project.
You do, and you still do. But I think one of the big lessons learned about this particular project for me from a fabrication standpoint was the fact that you really have to be in the field to be able to get this stuff right. You and I, we had design work happen. We had design prior to this. We worked with some engineers to design a structural decking system that was going to span that roof, right? But even that, we had to tweak several times because the way that the roof was sloped and its little edges and where screws were located on the existing roof, the drainage of that roof plane back to its little gutter system, et cetera, right? We had to tweak and redo this thing several times to be able to really make it work. And I think at the bigger scale, we're always talking about what's this microcosm and how does this fit into that bigger picture of large scale resilience planning and design. The fact is that if you're working with existing infrastructure, you got to be out there and see it and understand it, really know how it works, because just designing something on paper does not mean it's going to happen that way out in the field.
100%.
And I think, and so you and I spent the entire summer last year tweaking and reworking and understanding materials and how they go together and all of that stuff. And it was important, I think, for us to do that. It really made a big difference, both from our understanding of how to make this thing work, but also its ability to be replicable and also to tell a story of how other people can potentially do this in other locations. So I think we really just needed to get in there and get our hands dirty. I like doing that kind of stuff. I know you do. And so it was good to actually do that. But at the same time, it was us documenting those very specific little things that make such a difference in the long term.
No, totally. And I think, anything can work on paper, and you can draw anything up on a computer, but being in the field, is where the rubber meets the road. And that's where you figure out those nuances. And it is all those tweaks. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. So that's right. This was us out the gate, determined to do it right from the start, so, and I know we did. It was a tedious at times, and we spent an entire July sweating in a tent, putting these things together by hand. But to do so, like you said, it is now replicable. We can now say, okay, this is what to do, this is what not to do, this is what worked, this is what didn't work, this is what you need to look for, in different situations in the future. So the fact that we got that information down, I think, is huge. Now, just the second part of that question is, if Boston comes back, or if somebody else calls us and says, we want you to do the same thing here, how would you do it differently in the future?
I think we both thought that structural decking system can be improved. I think that was the main thing there, right? We built it. It works. We built 95 by 6 foot squares, essentially, of structural decking that are now up on those shelters, and they're going to last for many, many, many years. We can't spend our entire summer doing that all the time, right? So I think what I would do differently was really take a look at that structural decking. Now, first, that wasn't initially part of the contract anyway. We weren't expecting that aspect of it. So we were flexible, and we really kind of, okay, let's do it. If that's what they want, let's get that thing done. And we did. And so now that we know that there's this component to, potential future installations, especially here in Boston, I think we really need to look at how does that aspect of the project work? Is something we can 3D print and get tested and have it be out there so that we can just have that run that way? Is it someone else that's fabricating with a different kind of material? Is it a metal material, something like that? So I think really looking at that decking system is going to be a big difference, because that was probably the hardest part of the whole project. The actual plant install was the easy part.
No, that was certainly fun and easy. And I just want to point out to everybody listening that the structural decking was a last-minute ad by the owners of the bus shelters to help distribute the snow load or potential snow loads that we may be facing in Boston. The original idea was to build the green roofs, and this is how we did it 10 years ago. We built the green roofs straight on top of the bus shelters. But for a long-term use, long-term safety, in order for them to endure any kind of a New England winter, we were asked to put this structural decking up to help distribute that snow load. So that was something that we weren't expecting, and something that we had to tweak. That's where all the tweaking, retweaking, and pivoting came in. So, but it was key, and it's one of those things that definitely I think will take this idea into the future in multiple different areas. So Mike, 10 years ago, we teamed up with YouthBuild Boston, and this time around, we did it again. We teamed up with YouthBuild Boston for the installation. Why was that partnership so important, to you, to me, the project as a whole? What was that unique partnership? Because we could have just gone and done it. Boston could have just hired a company that just went out and did it. Why was bringing in, this outside nonprofit into this installation process? Why was it so important to the mission, and why was it so important to the project?
I mean, for me, workforce development has always been a big part of my approach to everything. I always think about who's going to be doing the work, how much are they going to get paid, how do we get people skilled up and trained up to be able to do this for the long term. So whether it's architecture or landscape architecture, installations, whatever, I'm just constantly thinking about the workforce development side of it. When we did this 10 years ago, that was a big component of why we did this, right? It wasn't about green roofs specifically. It was about, if we're going to build multi-billion-dollar things along the waterfront in the city of Boston, who is going to do that work? Because right now, at this time, there's nobody capable of doing that.
Correct.
In this particular city, right? And so we need to have some skills and expertise. We need to have people starting to work towards that. So 10 years ago, that was a big part of this, is what does it mean to start training people up on what green infrastructure is and what kind of work is available for them to do that. 10 years later, here we are again. And I wanted to make sure that was still a component of why we were doing this, was talking about workforce development, getting people trained and skilled for this kind of stuff. The green roofs that went up on these bus shelters are the exact same green roofs that are going up on top of these commercial buildings downtown, and in a lot of these kind of, passive house standard buildings and anywhere else that you might see the exact same everything. And so why not get people trained on the ones that they can see here in the city that might get built somewhere else? And so just having that aspect of it was very important for this project. I also worked there for 10 years, so I have a soft spot for YouthBuild Boston. Those guys are great. I love what they do there, and I just want to make sure that, again, I think they're just prime for that kind of work. And the young people in that organization are very excited to do this kind of stuff. And when they were out there with us, they were, out there every day working hard and just really enjoying the work that they were doing.
No, 100%. And when I'm speaking on these projects, or when I'm speaking about green infrastructure, but especially this, this project, I say people, the biggest challenge right now is municipalities will say, well, we don't have the workforce to maintain that. And, and then there's this whole workforce that says, well, we want something to do. So it's just it's a chicken and the egg. The city needs green infrastructure. The city needs a workforce. Well, you can't build the green infrastructure without somebody to maintain it. So the unique piece about this was we're here's the chicken and the egg right here. We did it on a couple other projects as well. But, that's I think the key to, this whole thing. And that's one of the many things I'm very proud of, and what makes it unique is that we were able to, to find the workforce, to do it and get the green infrastructure. It's here you go, here it is, and here are the people who are going to know how to take care of it. They got installed and trained simultaneously. Boom. it just kind of, it takes that one kind of spooling question within almost every municipality I talk to is, who does what when, and everybody wants the green infrastructure, but like you said, there's a huge gap within the industry between the design and the installer.
Right. We're just trying to connect the dots, and this is a great way to start that, is helping connect those dots.
It shows that the dots can be connected, absolutely, and in unique ways. Like, you really have to go outside the lines, because the typical pattern, that say any municipality would follow of here's the design, here's the project, here's the bid, here's the, it's just like sometimes that doesn't fit for new ideas. So it's like, how can we go outside the lines, still get it accomplished, and then some?
Yeah, 100%, exactly.
So, Mike, if you had a magic wand, though, how would you reimagine the installation process from concept to completion, for a project like this? Fabrication was the real tough part. Installation, though, was no joke, but we had a whole lot of love. That's what made it. We had a whole lot of people come out and really supporting the install. But how would you reimagine moving forward the installation process go?
Yeah, it's a great question. Looking back, it was really hard. There's a lot of things that probably could have been done better. I almost think about how I'd probably just leave it as it was, mainly because I got to see all the shortcomings and the hardest parts of what it takes to do something like this, to then do it better down the road, right? So I think moving forward, I don't know if I would do anything differently. If I had a magic wand, I don't know if I would change anything from the past, only because the hard parts made it, it made us able to see what needs to be fixed and adjusted to be able to then move forward that much more efficiently in the future. So with that said, then I think moving forward, that communication part between the public-private partnership with us, the city, and JCDecaux, the owners of the bus shelters, I think now that that's gotten kind of down and we have a rhythm there, that's going to make things much better as we move forward in the future, hopefully with expanding this project, but at least making sure that we're maintaining the 30 that we got now in an easy way. So I think that's going to be the big, that's going to be the easier part. So I don't know if I would honestly change anything that we did, because I think we've got a process that we're able to move forward with. And again, we have fabrication things that we can figure out, and there's some other aspects of the project that can really be tweaked and made better. But I think the actual institutional side of it, it was good to go through those rough patches and really try to figure those things out, because now we can do that with this project and hopefully with other projects as well. We know what to expect at this point, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of going all the way back to your intro, with social impact is finding a way to get that community involvement, finding a way to just identify those inequities. And so there are certain inequities in the workforce. And I would also just like to really just hope that this stands as a model moving forward when we're working on those billion-dollar projects that maybe, as I say in my design classes, be the plunk. It's like how far can the ripples of your idea or your project reach? How many people, how many different entities can you touch in doing that? And I think that kind of approach, seeing how far, instead of just taking the project, like we said, we could have just put them up ourselves. But I think taking it out like that is a great way to go. And I'm hoping that it kind of sets as a model for the future, for sure.
Be the plunk. Always love that
Be the
one.
plunk, my friend. Yes. So, when I've talked about this, I've given some presentations on this whole thing. People are just blown away when I talk about kind of small steps, big impact, and how much stormwater 70 square feet, a little tiny roof, can manage. Just wondering, can you break down for us, because this part is just fascinating, and for all the metrics geeks out there, you're going to love this. It's just can you break down how much does a single roof offset, and then how much does what is the impact of our 2024 project? What is the total impact of those 30 shelters? Because this is the part that gets me excited, and I think is so cool.
Yeah, no, it's fun, right? And it's an adult science fair. That's what we're doing here. It's our little lab that we're testing ideas out on, and for the next 3 years we're going to collect data and all of that, right? But yeah, so each shelter, when it rains at 1 inch, it can hold about 48 gallons worth of water. So if we break that down, it's something that we can all kind of, understand. If, people understand gas, like when you have to fill up your car with gasoline, right? People understand that. So if I had a Honda Civic, that has about 12.5 gallons of gas in a Honda Civic, which means basically, in a 1 inch rainstorm, one shelter can offset 4 Honda Civics of water if they were using water for gasoline instead of gas. So 4 Honda Civics per shelter of water, essentially, right? And if you multiply that across all 30 shelters, we're retaining essentially about 116 Honda Civics in a 1-inch rainstorm.
So for that 48 gallons is about a bathtub. Essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I like
exactly.
the Honda Civics, definitely.
People are always like, thinking about gas all the time. So I'm like, here's the gas.
Absolutely, gas. It's definitely right up there. But yeah, so yeah, we got how many Honda Civics now?
So it's 116 in a 1-inch bus shelter in a 1-inch rainstorm across all 30 shelters.
That's killer.
Yeah, right.
That's huge. So again, it's just like it's 70 square feet at a time. It's little sips. As I say in the green infrastructure classes, it's just these little sips, but those sips add up. And I think we did out, before, like if we had done all the bus shelters in the city of Boston, that equals just about an acre. In a 1-inch rain event, that's 27,000 gallons of water that you're offsetting. If you want to address the flooding issues of Boston, that's a lot of water to take out of the system.
A lot of water.
Yeah, and JC Deco, the current owners of those bus shelters, they have about 280. So that's a lot of Honda Civics. That's a lot of Tubbies.
Right. Think about it right now, right? We had about 11.5 inches of rain so far, not including today's rainstorm that we got so far in the city of Boston. So if you have that 11.5 inches, that's 16,500 gallons of water so far this year. It's April that we've taken out of that system. That's 13. That's a little over 1,300 Honda Civics, right? Just so far this year. And that's just with bus shelters.
Yep.
And so, these things can impact even those little sections of grass that we put up there. But it makes such a difference in this area along that 28 corridor where it's a lot of concrete. It's Blue Hill Ave, is the main kind of corridor there in Warren Street. A lot of concrete, a lot of sidewalk, a lot of buildings. These are those little sips that we're talking about all along that whole corridor that help pull just a little bit of that water off the street.
No, absolutely. And this is where we're certainly going to be nerding out, this year. But like, with this, as with 10 years ago, we were pretty good on metrics, but like we've now like next leveled it. So like what is the plan for gathering data and metrics, and what data would you like to gather, and how is this going to help kind of show the small steps, big impact? How is it going to kind of show the story and the impact of a project that didn't even cost $1 million? Like, we have to understand, we put up all these shelters for less than $1 million. It's on a project scale. This was like a drop in the bucket. So, what kind of other metrics? I'm happy to chime in here, but like, what are you excited about? What are you thinking about?
Yeah, I think the 3 biggest metrics that I'm excited about collecting for this project is, number 1, the stormwater filtration, which we talked about. Number 2 is the heat island effect.
Yep.
Using a thermal image camera to be able to test the difference in temperature between the green roofs and the sidewalk below. The bus shelters prior to getting the green roofs had glass on them, and so those underneath the shelters get really hot in the summertime. They're like little magnifying glasses up there. People underneath are actually waiting outside the bus shelter in the summertime because it's hotter underneath than it was outside of it. During our installation, we were putting these things up, and they were saying, it's going to finally have some shade. We're going to be nice and cool under here. So they were actually excited just by us putting up something to cover up that glass component of the shelter. So I'm excited to get that difference in temperature that we're talking about, and heat island effect in the city. The third thing really is about the plants themselves. This is going to be a bit of a test about what kind of, we have 17 different species of sedum up there. Which ones do well in which environments? We have little microclimates all over the city, and each one of these bus shelters is located in its own little microclimate. Some have protection from trees, some are blocked by buildings and wind, some are totally exposed to wind and sun and snow and everything else and get, windswept, right? So there's going to be different plants that react to those different things. In addition to that, we're going to be adding in, we've already added some in the fall, we're adding more this year, a lot of local, very kind of hyper-local New England-based plants up there also to test how they do. And so the next 3 years, we're going to be testing out which plants do well and which ones are these microclimates. Because at the end of the 3 years, we're going to be producing a book, essentially a care book that talks about all the things that we've learned over the past 3 years. That's a big part of it. It's really understanding the maintenance of these things and what plants can succeed the best on their own. Because at the end of the day, you want, as much drought tolerant, maintenance free care that you can do. And some locations are just better for others for different kinds of plants. And so I'm excited to really test that in real world, in the real life, and see how that happens over different seasons, over different storm events, different locations. We're going to learn a lot from that.
No, it's and those definitely are the three that being a water geek, I am excited to see how much water we are going to retain and offset over the course of the season. I show people that all the time the data on the 2014 study where the green roof was 81 degrees, the sidewalk was 127 degrees. So now just kind of amplifying that, being like, here's the green roof, how much is that? Here's the sidewalk, how much is that? What's the temperature underneath the green roof, which was a metric we didn't capture before. So I'm real excited to kind of get those three. And then, of course, the plant nerd in me is extremely excited because we've now seeded these shelters with multiple species of drought-tolerant native plants of all types, just to see what's going to take and how is it going to do. And, will it germinate? Sure. But will it be able to live? Will it flower? Will it then come back the next season? Huge experiment when it comes to this. Taking New England natives, taking Massachusetts natives, and just seeing how they will do in such extreme conditions, seeing how they will do in such a small amount of planting media. I mean, that's really going to be the big thing. They don't have a lot of room to root out. These shelters aren't very deep. However, plants are absolutely able to adapt. So with that nice sedum base, if we can get, native plant life going, I am extremely excited to then, after this season, next year when stuff comes back, start recording who's visiting the corridor. And we just did a whole podcast on the types of native bees and stuff that were found in urban areas. So I'm dying to get up there and start recording, like, what kind of moths and butterflies do we find? What kind of native bees are up there? And are we creating a green corridor through the city for nature to move? And are we really starting, could this be the first step in kind of balancing the built environment and the natural world, which is what I think the future of design is going to be all about. We have to figure out how to do that better. And I think this, this could really set it off. So definitely excited about those metrics, and I can't wait to start reporting on that. And yes, by the end, we will have a tome on how to put this together, what will work, how to identify what's up there. We will have perfected the seed mix, I'm hoping, within the next little bit. So definitely the plant part of me is just way nerding out on this.
Did you ever think as a kid that you'd be doing a science experiment as an adult and loving it this much? I mean, this is
never.
what it's about.
No, never. Because, but as with everything, when you get to do it for yourself and on your own terms, instead of being like, here, you're going to study this. It's like, no, I want to study this. Boom. Yep. You get to choose. Yeah. It's awesome. But that's why I love my job, because it's just it's just science class experimentation outside.
That's right.
And you put that with just meeting great people. And I do want you to tell the story about meeting great people in a bit though. But what's next, Mike? What's next for the Bus Shelter Initiative? Do you think this is going to kind of continue across the city? That's kind of up in the air. Do you think that other cities might be receptive? Now that Boston was the first and the first is out of the way, now that it's been proven, do you think that this is going to take off? Do you feel hopeful?
I do feel hopeful. This project, again, is about engagement, and it's about education, and it's about experimentation. I think a lot of there have been other cities that have done this in Europe, right? Paris has done this. They're doing it all over the different parts of the UK right now. There have been people who have done it, but it's been a little bit more about the product than the process, I think. And people have recognized that. There's also been some complaints in some other places where the lack of long-term maintenance thought has kind of crept back in, and there have been some failures in some of these green roofs and some of these shelters. And what we've done ahead of time is really thought a lot about that. And like we said, this is a science experiment. We're not just installing it and leaving it. We're coming in, we're testing ideas, we're testing locations, we're looking at these microclimates and really being careful about how we approach all these different locations and document all of this along the way. So for me, I think because of that, it's definitely replicable because we're going to have some very specific recommendations about what can be done in different parts of the city, but also how to engage with the people there. We're going to be engaging with different people with different languages, with different cultural backgrounds. And I think that's just as important when you have a resilient city as it is the product of the green roof itself, right? There's behavioral aspects of how people behave in the communities that they're in that can impact climate resiliency. And this is going to help contribute towards the understanding of all of that, the education behind that. Because we are approaching this from a process perspective, it's going to be something that more people are going to want to take a closer look at and think about how that can be done in their cities as well. I'm proud that, in fact, that this is the biggest one in North America.
Yep.
I'm hoping we can expand that, in the city of Boston. Current political climate's, interesting, but I think the fact that this is an educational tool and an engagement tool, that's a little different than just saying it's a green infrastructure product. And I think that because of that, it's definitely scalable, and it's definitely, again, another way to talk to people in other cities about how this can be done in their towns.
No, absolutely. Certainly. I'm glad that you said that. I'm very excited that this happened, but it is so scalable, that I could see it happening, more in Boston, but also due to the fact that we figured out some of the climate aspects, with the substructure and the decking. We can certainly take it to places like Minnesota where you're already doing other projects. We can start discussing with them about snow loads. The fact that we were about maintenance from the beginning. And that's where I think the biggest mistake usually happens with especially unique projects like this. But I think within green infrastructure is that everybody's so excited just to get it in. Like everybody just wants to get that green roof on the bus shelter, or everybody just wants to plant 500 trees, but they're not thinking about the longevity. They're not thinking about the maintenance. I get a lot of pushback about bioretention because a lot of bioretention systems fail because nobody had planned on how am I going to maintain this for the next 5 years. So the fact that we came into this almost maintenance first, like, look, there's no point in even doing it unless somebody's going to care for it, because it's a filter system. You have to maintain that filter just like your oil filter, just like your HVAC. Like it's a living filter, and it needs to be maintained. It's not a set it and forget it. And so that too is something I'm extremely proud of. With this. So I would love for you to say the story that. I love when you tell it, and I wish I had been there that day. But can you tell the story?
You just happened to leave right before we did it.
Can you just tell the story about the woman that you bumped into? Was it in Mattapan Square?
Mattapan Square.
Yeah, I wish I had been there for this because it was so cool. So just tell that story real quick.
Yeah, we were in Mattapan Square. It was one of our final installations that we had been doing along that 30 bus shelter corridor piece. And we had just wrapped up, and you had actually just pulled away with the truck because you had been right in that bus loading parking spot. So you took the truck out so you could let the bus, pull in and out. And this woman walks up to me. She was in her 80s, and walks up to me very quietly and calmly and just says, what are you guys doing here? And I said, we're installing green roofs up on these bus shelters as part of a city project that we've been working on. She's like, oh, that's great. They did that like 10 years ago on Talbot Ave, where I used to live, and they took it down a couple of years later, and I was really sad about that. I really love those things. Why are they going to do that again this time? Is it just going to be, a temporary 1-year thing? And I said, well, first of all, I love that you said that because that was Trevor and I who actually did that installation 10 years ago, and we're still here. And we're doing this again. But number two, no, this time the city has invested in long-term maintenance of this project, and they are themselves going to be maintaining this as well. So no, we are planning on leaving this here at least 5 years, if not longer. The goal here is that this is going to be here for a good part of the time, that this is going to be built in as part of the city's infrastructure system generally, and that we're going to be part of that as well in collecting the data. And so she was just super happy to hear the fact that she saw those 10 years ago. She loved them back then. She saw that they were coming in again. And she was just worried about the fact that they were going to go away. And I told her no, that they're not. And she was just really happy about that. So it's nice to also just meet somebody who remembered our work 10 years ago.
That's the whole thing. Like it had an impact on the community. It did. Had an impact on the people as well. And when we were installing these things, like the amount of positive feedback when people like, what are you doing? Told them what they were doing. Like you said, people like, oh, it's going to be so much cooler. But like I got in conversations, with people waiting for the bus, and they were talking about climate change. They were talking about pollinators and stuff like the conversation is there. And the fact that people are already making those connections and just getting excited. Other people were just really excited at the community, a beautiful beautification that's going to be happening. They love the fact that we were just taking the time and helping beautify the community and kind of soften all that hardscape. The community feedback and welcoming of this project, was huge, because oftentimes things just kind of boom, just like happen within a community and everybody's like, what was that? So the fact that they're excited about this, was really cool.
The thing I like about this also is that it's, intergenerational. There was another site I was at where there was two teenage kids that were there. They were probably in middle school. These two boys that were hanging out. We were, putting up the green roof on there, and they were asking what it was. And I was describing to them what the green roof was. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And I said, you guys take the bus here? And they said, yeah, we go down to, towards Codman Square. And I said, well, this is going to go all the way down to Madpan Square. So when you're on the bus, you'll see them from every shelter all the way down on your route. They said, really? Well, that's cool. I want to see that. I want to check it out. Right. And they were excited about this. And so it was these two, 14-year-old kids. And then there was the woman who in her 80s, all of whom were excited about this in their own way. Right. And so I like the fact that it was there, but also it was in this particular community. It wasn't in, Copley Square, which is beautiful. It wasn't in, the Seaport or Back Bay or some of these other places that were really kind of tourist heavy, right? Mm-hmm. This is in the community with people who have been there for generations who are going to be seeing this. And I really appreciated the fact that the mayor selected that route for this particular installation. But I also was very happy about it. I live, 2 blocks from several of these shelters on Warren Street. So I get to see them every day too. And I'm driving by them all the time. So I also just enjoy the fact that it's in my community, in my neighborhood.
Yeah, and the pride that the YouthBuild kids took. Mm-hmm. Knowing that, some of them share that line or, and just being able to tell their friends that, they were a part of it, like that amount of pride and just the pride they showed in the installation, was huge. Like I said, it's just like, this is so much more than a green infrastructure project. So I guess, we're about at time, Mike. So can you just let us know, like, if people want to learn more, dig deeper, or if they want to get involved, or if they just want to follow your work, where can they find you? Where can they find out more about the projects? And then if you could just let us know, what other kind of cool stuff are you working on now? Because I know I'm not the only cool dude that you work with.
You're the coolest dude that I work with.
Appreciate that, my friend.
Sure. No, you can follow us on Instagram. I think that's where we're going to have some of our most active stuff on social media. So Social Impact Collective's Instagram account. So find us there. I've already had people sending, messages and stuff asking what kind of CDMs we have and how we're engaging with people and stuff like that. So we're having direct communications with folks already on Instagram. You can go to our website, socialimpactcollective.com. You can track us there because we're going to be providing specific updates on the bus shelters all along the way and the data we're collecting there as well. So that's going to be a spot that we're going to try and have regular information on there. And yeah, we're working all kinds of different stuff. I mean, we've got affordable housing projects. Again, we have this, what I'm calling agritecture projects work out in Minnesota, which is, architecture that's based in the food industry, in agriculture, in farming, and in youth engagement. So there's some cool stuff happening there. Yeah, we have, commercial projects and all kinds of different things going on. So yeah, just go to our website and check out what we're doing there. And feel free to reach out to me directly. Again, Michael at socialimpactcollective.com. I'm more than happy to chat with anybody and everybody who's interested in this stuff. We're all about engagement. We're all about talking to folks, and the more the merrier.
No, absolutely. And it's also just key to point out that mission, that it's so much more than just architecture. I do have to ask you the question, though, that I ask everybody. It's usually my first question, but I'll make this one our last, now that people know how to get in touch with you. I'm always asking everybody, how did you first get in touch with nature? How did your relationship with nature, first start? I know you're in architecture, but you are a man with nature at his heart as well as community. So how did you get connected to nature in the beginning?
So I'm originally from New Mexico. My family comes from, rural New Mexico. We have a ranch out that way along the Pecos River, about 100 miles east of Albuquerque. And I grew up spending most of my time out there. I spent the first 4 years of my life living on the ranch, and then, moved back towards Albuquerque, and then was out there every summer and weekends and all kinds of other stuff. And one of the first things I learned as a kid is that our job is not to use the land, but we are stewards of the land. And that's what it boils down to. We have to be stewards to our environment around us, because that's the only way that it's going to last. It's the only way that we can be able to pass on what we experience on to our kids and grandkids and future generations in that way. And we don't own the land. We can't control the land. We can't control Mother Nature. As much as we try, we never will. And so why fight it? Why not just be stewards of it and try to support it as best we can? the healthier the land is, the healthier we will be. And that's just something that I think about every day. And that's how it's just built into the way I do work.
No, absolutely. Excellent, man. Thank you so much. Michael Chavez, you can find him at socialimpactcollective.com. Spearheader of the Green Roof Bus Shelter Initiative, good friend of mine. Michael, thank you so much. And we'll be seeing you soon on some new crazy ass project, I bet.
You know it. Absolutely.
All right, man.
Thanks.
All good, man. Thank you.